Dashirale, this is Conjunandro, your friend. I just wanted to briefly before I go to work. Yes, I work. I'm not a stay-at-home Lama. Uh, if people are giving advice about, oh, you can uh, do this practice or do that practice, or you can understand your emotions this way or that way. Everybody's having a lot of fear, everybody's having a lot of panic, everybody's mind is disturbed. If you've already gotten to the point where you're panicked and disturbed and freaked out, telling people philosophical points um, as a means, like, oh, look at the impermanence, look at the emptiness, look at this or that. It may be somewhat useful to a handful of practitioners who are like at that cusp of needing that sort of reminder. But really, in my opinion, uh, if you haven't already been practicing those practices like really intensely, if you haven't been able to dissolve your emotions through examining the emptiness of emotion or the interdependence of emotion, or focusing on compassion or focusing on whatever, what have you, just basic Mahāyāna dealing with life sort of practices. If those things aren't like hourly, minute by minute, day by day sort of habits, starting them now is probably not realistic. So I would tell you, pray, have faith, believe, and ask for the blessings of the Buddha or whatever you have faith in, and approach that way. Where you're at the bedrock now, you're really like, you're really hurting, you're really at this point of intense anxiety, and you haven't already acclimated and accustomed yourself to dealing with severe emotional difficulty through sort of excavating your own soul or your own inner being. Um, it's it, it's not really the right time. I mean, maybe it's the perfect time, but if you try and you try and you can get it together, then like by all means, like you have to use your practices like a gearbox, and shift into something that's less reliant on your own capacity and more reliant on the capacity of the perfect deity. So rely on the Buddhas, pray to the Buddhas to help bless you in a way that completely relieves your fear, suffering, anxiety, etc., without difficulty, pain, in happiness and joy, without obstacle, in the great spontaneity of their wisdom, blessing. Let whatever is needed arise. Form that sort of prayer, so that it be easy and light, and that you escape the turmoil, the self-created turmoil of fearing for the self, fearing for the loss of self. And I'll just touch on that briefly. If you're a Buddhist looking for reassurance from the Lamas or from your teachers about the disturbing situation, you've already been told what to do, so do it. And if you don't know what to do, you have to start at the very beginning with refuge. And refuge is about relying on something greater than yourself to protect you, hold you, love you, bless you, and imbue you with grace, and to protect all sentient beings. And so you have to have that reliance on the Buddhas first and foremost. You have to be, bedrock simple, just really basic with what you're doing. If you get too elaborate, then you're very much likely to, if you're like, okay, I have to look at the interdependence or the emptiness, or I have to see this is impermanent or whatever, like, you're really just like toying with the intellect and playing with the intellect, and you're just as likely to enter into an abundance of thought, which will spiral out of control and into a lot of what I call future projection, and the what ifs, and imagining various outcomes to different problems you have, and that never helps. It's always an artificial model. It's never the truth. Your mind cannot give you an accurate model of reality. It simply doesn't have the information. The world is, one that has infinite factors, and you simply don't know enough to know what will happen. So and if you've examined your life in the past, lots of good things have happened to you that you never saw coming. So rely on that. Rely on the blessings of the Buddhas, that, if you need something, it will come. And also, if you have the courage, if you're like a courageous practitioner, know that whatever pain or suffering or difficulty will shape you in a positive way if you adhere to your refuge. And that's probably the wrong thing to say, and really I should just say, pray, have faith, believe in the power of blessing, believe in the grace and wisdom of the Buddhas, believe in the blessing power of supplication and aspiration, and trust in bodhicitta, tathagata garbha, your Buddha nature, to shine in this moment. Don't be complex, don't be intellectual, don't try and like break things down, keep your thoughts to a minimum, because as soon as you allow your train of thought to start elaborating on things, it can get out of your hands pretty quickly, and then you can be in trouble. So just every time you catch yourself worrying or thinking, bring your mind back to the deity, bring your mind back to the guru, bring your mind back to the Buddha, and relax and be in that graceful presence of contentment and joy and excellence, and breathe that in, really feel that with every fiber, that there is this pervading beneficence, benevolence, goodness that is radiant and endless, and just allow yourself to feel loved, allow yourself to feel cared for, and allow everything else to fall away, and just repeat that over and over, and say Om Mani Padme Hum constantly, like, if you can't do anything else, then Om Mani Padme Hum is always a good way to go, because it's very easy, and it really it will really keep the mind occupied. But I don't know if it is really the time for like deep practices of examination of skandhas and interdependence and things of that nature. I think it's a little too much intellect, and fear really rides on the intellect. It really likes you to be thinking, and it really, the faster your thoughts or the more complex your thoughts, the more fear can really have a hold of you. Otherwise, if you just have faith in the deity, even if fear remains, there's a counterbalance, and you might feel like you're being crushed or pushed or twisted in some way, but there's an opposing force which is as good as things are bad, if not better. And the more you trust in the goodness, the more you trust in the light and the happiness, the more that the farther away from the grip of fear you will become. So that's just simple and straightforward. Just envision the deity, or just feel the deity's presence, envision the Buddha, feel the Buddha's presence, trust in that, and find enjoyment in the radiance, the feelings that brings you. Feel the contentment that brings you, and relax into that, and use that as a sort of medicine or therapy every time you get a spare moment, or every time you catch yourself thinking about what might happen. Just bring yourself back to that pleasant place, and just be very simple and very easy about it. And because at this point, if you haven't done a lot of work confronting fear or dealing with fear, if you haven't intentionally gone into the abyss of your own negativities, confronting that which has now arisen from that space, being brand new to the idea that you could feel as much fear or feel as much difficulty as you're feeling. It's unlikely that sort of the approaches of logicians, the approach of this is an illusion, or this is interdependent, or this is impermanent, is unlikely to help you. And it's sort of similar to telling someone who's very angry to calm down. I've very rarely found that ideas, like intellectual strategies, help once the emotions have already gotten sort of out of control. So that's just my thought. I think just get really down to the very basics of refuge, of believing in the blessing, power, and protection of the Buddhas, and holding that in your heart, and feeling that around you. And don't elaborate with the mind, because if you don't have absolute trust that you have control over your thoughts, and you can't stop your thoughts whenever you want to, going into proliferation of thinking is, kind of a dangerous tightrope. So that's my thought on it. Okay. I love you very much. Have a beautiful day.